Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about the UK's plan for trade, what we know so far, and how you can have your say, brought to you by the Institute of Export and International Trade. And indeed, this webinar comes at a critical time for the UK, with Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg recently writing in The Telegraph that the trade border is an example of how government efficiency eases inflation. The government is due to publish its plan for the trade border, the target operating model, this autumn, and today we'll be hearing about what this plan may mean for UK businesses, though please bear in mind that the model has not yet been published. My name is William Barnes-Graham, the Executive Editor at the Institute, and I will be your host for this afternoon. Next slide, please. For those of you wondering what plan the UK may have, you'll be glad to hear that we have two of the people in the know when it comes to evolving government policy and its practical implications for traders. It's my delight to welcome back Kevin Shakespeare. Kevin was once a regular on our webinars, but has recently moved up into the world of conferences, high-level meetings, and influencing the trade landscape at just about every level. Kevin, great to have you back with us again today. How have you been?
I've been good, Will, and it's great to be back. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Excellent stuff. Kevin is the Director of Strategic Partnerships and International Development at the Institute and has been spending a lot of his time recently leading the Institute's work as a key government stakeholder in the development of the target operating model. We're also delighted to be joined by a current regular webinar in Suzanne Adequim, who will be talking through the practical implications of some of the changes government is currently considering. Hi, Suzanne, how are you?
Hi, well, I'm really good, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here today with Kevin. Thank you.
Fantastic. Suzanne is a customs and trade specialist at the Institute with extensive experience in all areas of international trade, logistics, supply chain, and global customs compliance. But before we get into the meat of it, no pun intended for SBS traders, some housekeeping notes from me. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the question drop-down on the control panel, usually to the right-hand side of your screen. We hope to get to a number of your questions today, though please note we cannot guarantee that we will get to every question in the allocated time. As such, I will be prioritising questions that have relevance to the wider audience, so I won't be going into company or sector-specific queries as such. Please also note that if your questions are short and clear, I am more likely to be able to read them. And while Kevin and Suzanne are extremely knowledgeable about trade, I'm not sure they'd call themselves political forecasters, so we'll be avoiding questions asking us to predict what will happen in Westminster this autumn. Finally, you will receive access to today's slide pack, a recording of the webinar, and a survey asking for your thoughts about the government's plans for UK trade in a follow-up email we will be sending this afternoon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. That's enough of me, though. On the next slide, it is my delight to pass the mic on to Kevin to begin today's webinar. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Will, and good afternoon, everybody again. Thank you very much for joining today. So we're going to go through a few aspects today of the target operating model. I just wanted to say we're not here to preempt government announcements. That's coming in the autumn. It's due in the autumn. What we are here to do is to try and inform industry and also to seek your feedback. So let's start with what's changing. So in April 2022, this year, the government announced that the border controls that were due would not be introduced, and those border controls really were staggered, but those included the border controls due at the end of June this year. And Her Majesty's government said it would work with industry and the devolved administrations to develop a new target operating model. So if we have next, please. So why are we here today? So we're here as a webinar to provide you with the update for this evolving plan. We would say it's evolving policy, but we're here to inform you and to get your feedback. Next, please. So what we know so far, so really we would say there are positives that are coming out of these evolving plans, especially around aspects of trade facilitation. Now, For some of us, this term trade facilitation is a relatively new term, and it could mean many things. An export could be a trade facilitation. One of the main drivers, though, is the World Trade Organization, the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. So what we're seeing, not just in the UK, but globally, is this focus on trade facilitation. How can we remove some of the barriers to trade, the documentary barriers, the physical checks, the customs barriers? So we're going to look at some of those aspects today. Next, please. So we are here to as much be in listening mode as delivery mode. We want to get your feedback. So at the end, when we send a recording and make the recording available, there will be a survey for you to complete as well. And it is a short survey. It's not a long survey, and we have several poll questions because we want to get your feedback. So if we have the next slide, please. So let's set some context here. International trade can be complex. We would stress, though, the more you do it, the better. The best business is repeat business. If you can get it right first time, you can deal with your customer overseas again, and hopefully do repeat business. But international trade can be complex. We have multiple actors. It's not just the exporter, it's not just the importer. We have customs agents, logistics service providers, possibly wholesalers, intermediaries as well. There can be complex documentation, which can vary by country and certainly by product and produce. And we have different government systems through which data needs to be inputted, not just in the UK, but in overseas countries as well. So if we have the next, please. So let us think about two important questions, and I think we should always ask ourselves these questions. Why can legitimate trade not flow freely? If I'm prepared to trade legitimately, provide information, so for example, can I provide advanced data earlier in the supply chain to get the benefits of trading legitimately and doing things compliantly? So now let's think of this in the following context. Next, please. So how will safety and security information be submitted? Next. How will SPS controls be applied? And next, and the role of trusted trader schemes. So these are all areas we're going to look at, and we've got some slides coming up presented by Suzanne and myself, which will cover these areas. But these are some key principles we'll be covering today. And finally, next, what is the role of the Institute of Export and International Trade? We are here to inform, to gather information, your feedback, but also we're here to support you on an ongoing basis. So I think now we're going to move to a poll question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. As you can see, a lot to cover, so we'll go through this poll quite quickly. And we're just going to ask you, what is your understanding around concepts like the single trade window and the ecosystem of trust? I won't give too much away, but asking you to give a strong understanding, quite strong understanding, weak understanding, or no understanding. Kevin, we're already getting questions through. Thank you, everyone. The question we've had through from Dylan is his business is a small business and he's worried that the benefits you refer to are only available for larger businesses. Will this be the case?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dylan, for the question, and it's a really good question. It's one we get asked quite a lot. Is that no, this is not just for large businesses. It's for businesses of all sizes, businesses of all different products and produce. We really want to see SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprise, micro businesses benefit as much as mid-sized and large businesses. So no, it's not just for large businesses. We are here to support understanding and application of these principles for also for small and micro businesses. So definitely not just for large businesses.
Thank you, Kevin. I hope that's been helpful, Dylan. Just going to close the response to that poll. So not many of you have a strong understanding yet, and that's understandable. These are relatively new concepts, only 3% there. 22% of you have quite a strong understanding. 52% of you have heard of it, but have a weak understanding. And then just about a quarter of you have no understanding. And just for context, we ran this poll a couple of months ago, and then there's about 13% of people said they had quite a strong understanding or a strong understanding. So the level of understanding seems to be going up, Kevin. Any thoughts on that kind of shift, a small shift that's starting?
Yeah, I think it's positive, and do very much agree that these are new concepts, and we're here to help explanation of these concepts, and again to stress that these are not just UK concepts. These are concepts which have really been driven by the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement and work being done internationally as well. So clearly what we want to do is increase that understanding further, but make sure that all businesses benefit from these big global initiatives and the UK initiatives as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you everyone for responding to that poll. But as noted, we've got a lot to get through, and so I'm now going to pass over to Suzanne on the next slide, who's going to talk about some of the possible plans for safety and security information.
Thanks very much, Will, and hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. We're firstly going to look at safety and security information. For all imports and exports, as part of the declaration process, the logistics providers need to supply an entry summary declaration, which is commonly known as an ENS, and this provides customs with the safety and security information about a trader's goods. Under the World Customs Organization's Safe Framework of Standards, the safety and security declarations were introduced as intelligence and risk-based controls of supply chains to allow for customs-to-customs activities and to work with other international organizations to keep supply chains safe. On top of the ENS declaration, traders also need to provide a customs declaration, and both of these declarations are done separately and the data doesn't transfer. This means that there is a duplication on input, but it runs the risk of errors, and industry would operate much more efficiently if we can reduce the duplication of data input. The single trade window concept would allow the emphasis on pre-population of data to reduce that data input duplication. And if a trader can enter the information themselves only once into the system, then they don't have to forward that data separately out to all the other intermediaries or other agencies that are interested in the data. And that data as well is going to have been entered at that source. Thus, this maintains the security of the supply chain data, improving the speed of transfer as well as the accuracy of the data that's provided by the trader. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we have a table of the safety and security data input options that has been taken from a government presentation to industry of what they are reviewing with regards to improving the flow of data for safety and security. So what we're looking at here for businesses who are infrequent traders, which is the top line there, they could log on to the single trade window and use the safety and security portal to make the ENS declaration. The carrier will then be able to complete the formalities for the safety and security through the declaration, which then talks to government, who can assess the safety and security risk of the goods. They can also decide if the goods need to be physically checked and alert the relevant agencies such as Border Force or HMRC if they had to carry out any checks. For businesses who carry out regular import and/or export transactions, which is the middle section there, they too will be able to provide safety and security data into a single trade window, and the government are currently looking at these interactions taking place with existing software offerings. The data here is collected in advance of arrival of the goods, and it can be shared across the declarations through the single trade window. Again, government can risk assess the goods and decide if a physical check needs to take place. And then on the final line here, this is for the larger businesses with the capability to share supply chain data with the government. The company would be able to put in place technology that they can share with supply chain data direct with government through the single trade window, and they would be authorised by the government to use this method. The safety and security formalities are completed via the supply chain data, directly digested into the government systems, removing the need for a specific declaration to be submitted. So the data is entered once, and then it will be sent to the respective parts of government as per the requirements for the goods. Again, at an early stage, the government can instantly risk assess the goods and give advice notification of checks that are required. I'd like to hand back to Kevin, who's now going to discuss the requirements for the sanitary and phytosanitary products.
Thank you, Suzanne. I think to re-emphasise one important point there, and there were obviously several important points, is that safety and security advanced risk and information is needed under, again, global rules from the World Customs Organization, WTO Safe Framework. But also it shows the importance of advanced data as well. So advanced supply chain data is absolutely essential, and it links in with what I'm going to talk around now, including in the sanitary and phytosanitary and the concept of trusted trader, which Suzanne will talk about. But I think, again, we need to set the context here. We set the context of why safety and security information is needed. We also need to set the context of why it's needed for sanitary and phytosanitary, and I'll probably use the acronym SPS now. It is required to protect biosecurity and public health. And we should never forget that's very, very important. And it applies for plant-based products, products of animal origin, and indeed fish as well. So the current processes involve an import pre-notification. So for those of you doing it regularly, you'll be familiar with the IPAF system in the UK or Great Britain. You will be aware of certification for the likes of phytosanitary certificates and export health certificates, and documentary checks and identity and physical checks. But we need to think about this in terms of key principles that could apply to improve the efficiency of supply chains. So with the likes of advanced data, so advanced data brings advanced risk in. It also tries to identify true origin, true consignor. Who is the real producer? Can you get provenance right back to the beginning of supply chain? And that's absolutely essential for a variety of reasons. And where you have this legitimate trade, you then have proportionate controls and checks based on that legitimate trade. That then allows you to reduce the documentation, the paperwork, and as Suzanne's indicated, avoid the duplication of data, this concept of tell us once. If we have a next slide, please. So we're going to start with plant and plant products, a busy slide, but worth going through this. And you can see in the light blue font here some quite important principles. So we can see the planned July controls of the 2022 that we're going to come into play. We can see the low risk plants. We can suddenly see no requirement, and we would stress this is evolving policy, it's not actual policy, and this is why we're very much seeking industry feedback around some of these initiatives around trade facilitation. So pre-notification not required, what we know as IPAF. Certification, so an example would be phytosanitary certificates, not required. Documentary checks and identity and physical checks on the far right column. We can then move to a distinction between plants moved for a trusted trader scheme and high risk plants. And we would stress, because you by all means pose questions in terms of what do we mean by definition of low risk, medium risk, high risk. And clearly there will be distinctions. So distinctions set at global levels and distinctions set at UK levels in terms of definitions. And those could be, for example, how we treat seeds, where do they fit in? How do we treat plants for planting? But again, we can see with this trusted trader scheme, which we're going to talk about, some benefits here. Checks conducted by trusted trader at their premises. Check levels depending on origin of goods and commodity, which is, as we said, important to have true origin. And then we can see phytosanitary certificates are required, but then they're moving towards this new global concept of e-phyto, which again will make dramatic changes to how we treat phytosanitary certificates. So that movement towards e-phyto. But we can see differences between low risk plants move through trusted trader schemes where you're a trusted trader, which we will speak about shortly, and high risk plants. And that affects all elements, the pre-notification, the certification, and the both documentary and identity and physical checks. If we have the next slide, please. So now let's move towards animal products, and we've got several slides here and around animal products, and again to stress evolving policy. So that's for both products of animal origin animal byproducts, live animals, and high-risk food not of animal origin. So again, we can see the planned July controls that were planned, obviously not put in place. And then we have a definition of low-risk animal products. And we can again see here in light blue, commercial documentation, what we know as the export health certificate, only, not vet signed. And I'm sure those of you involved in having to receive and export health certificates will know that could be a benefit for you. But even in pre-notification, exploring if commercial data can be used. So if we can get advanced supply chain data, evidence of provenance, supply chain traceability, and I might speak about this further in the context of what we call ecosystem of trust shortly as well. So we can see changes there. And again, we have this definition of what is low risk, what is medium risk, what is high risk. And I will refer to something shortly. Next, please. So for medium risk, again, we have a distinction between trusted trader and medium risk commodity without trusted trading. We can see a reduction in ID and physical checks there, and where you are a trusted trader. So again, quite big difference when we're talking about medium risk. Now, I think it's fair to say, and we'll come on to high risk in a minute, that examples like live animals would very much be in the high risk category. So again, we can see changes there. If we have a next, please. So high risk, clearly high risk is high risk, and clearly it requires the highest level of documentary checks, the highest level of identity and physical checks as well. And clearly then it would require the import pre-notification, what we know as IPAFs, and the export health certificate signed by an official vet. And we may come back later, so just some observations about how businesses need to prepare and how industry prepares. And so that's whether you're an importer, whether you're an exporter, whether you're a wholesaler, whether you're a logistics service provider, a port community system provider, and so on. This is all very important, and it's all important that the industry works together in this regard. Next, please. So I'll hand back for a poll question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And yeah, I'm just going to launch this second poll, which is asking you what your view is on the facilitations mentioned by Kevin there under the target operating model for plant and animal products. It's just asking you how much it would benefit your business. They may not benefit your business at all, or may not be relevant, and there's a not sure option as well. Kevin, in touching on the point you said at the end there, we've had a question from Rachel, which is it likely going forwards that businesses will have to treat movements of plant products, animal products, and fish differently?
I would say yes and no. So probably no from perspective of some aspects of how you arrange logistics, how you make customs declarations, how you make, which and Suzanne will talk about this shortly, how you maintain records, compliance, how you configure commodity codes and origin, and so on. All remain very, very important. But yes, in some aspects here. So there is clearly a distinction, not just between plant, animal, and fish, but also the definition of low risk. And you know, if we think about animal products, where do composite products with less than 50% animal byproduct come into this? So we can see distinctions even within these different categories, which is why it's so important for businesses to reflect on the nature of their product and their produce, where it goes in the supply chain, what commodity code applies. So we always stress the importance of having the correct commodity code and also having a very clear goods description as well. So whilst it's yes and no, most importantly of all, businesses need to reflect on the type of produce they have, what supply chain it's part of, and then link it in accordingly. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. It really sounds as though information is key there. I'm just going to close the poll and share the results. So, I mean, not all companies trade in plants and animal products, and that's reflected there in 39% of you saying it's not relevant to your business. But the rest of you, out of the rest of you, 19% of you say they would benefit your business but could go further, compared to 10% of you who say it would greatly benefit your business. Only 6% of you can see no benefit, and again, a quarter of you not sure. Perhaps unsurprising given the early stage of this information being shared. But Kevin, I mean, amongst the 60% of people for whom this is relevant, this particular part of the presentation, pretty positive, I'd say.
Yeah, I would say positive, and obviously there'll be a recognition that that attendees, not every attendee here is going to be trading in sanitary and phytosanitary goods, but very positive. And I would also suggest that we're very much here to hear your ideas. We've held consultations before, we've held surveys recently, we've had webinars and lunchtime learning for our members. We're very much here to have your feedback. You will have experience, you will have practical trading experience. Please give us your feedback of where you see it could go further, clearly further where there is legitimate trade and where there is advanced supply chain data. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And just to flag again, we will be sharing that survey after the webinar. And also to flag the single trade window has been mentioned a few times, and you've had a few questions on it. We have run a couple of webinars on it already this year. So if you haven't watched those before, do keep an eye out for the YouTube link, which will come in the email this afternoon, because you will be able to watch back that webinar. But thanks, Kevin. I believe it's back to Suzanne for the next couple of slides on trusted traders. So over to you, Suzanne.
Thanks, Will. So a trusted trader scheme, this is the common terminology that we're coming across now. This is a way for government to offer simplifications to a border regime, and it benefits for traders who are operating compliantly and maintain effective records, which was something that Kevin has just mentioned with regards to the SPS goods. But it doesn't just apply to SPS, it applies to all goods and all areas of trade. World Trade should recognise these benefits for all supply chain actors, so whether they are a large business or a medium or a small business, as well as some micro small businesses, which we're starting to see emerge, looking at carrying out international trade, carrying out those imports and exports. And when we hear trusted trader, it's often associated with authorised economic operator scheme, which traders may be familiar with on the call today, the AEO. And there we have two categories that apply. We've got the AOC, which is an operator that can apply custom simplifications, and AOS, where a trader can apply for approved safety and security status. And this is based on HMRC's risk assessment against financial solvency, appropriate record of compliance with customs requirements, and a satisfactory system of managing commercial and transport records. The trusted trader can also be applied to trusted movements, which is part of the digital trade agenda that's been introduced the concept of digital trade corridors and electronic trade documents. The single trade window is another example of how digital trade can evolve, connecting supply chains and countries. And again, as Kevin said, this is a WTO initiative, so we see lots of countries around the world are working with single trade windows or looking to put them in place. So we've already seen that in Africa, countries such as Kenya. We've also got Europe and Australia as well. They're working to put such platforms in place along with the UK. Next slide, please. The Trusted Trader Scheme is a way for the government to offer these simplifications or alterations to a border regime for traders who can prove that they have been and will be compliant in the future. Traders are expected to demonstrate their ability to enforce compliance rigorously through a variety of means, including inspection of their premises, audit of their systems and processes, a review of their compliance history, and an agreement to share supply chain data with government agencies. The idea is to make it easier for compliant trade to pass through the border quickly and without hassle, while still collecting relevant data to be able to identify and deal with any abuse of the system. Traders can therefore benefit from being able to undertake their own cargo and document checks at their premises, self-auditing. It will reduce the certification requirements, especially for SPS, as we've already mentioned. It may reduce the frequency of declarations as well. So, for example, instead of just one declaration per shipment, the government are reviewing the possibility of grouping them into periodic declarations, for example, on a monthly basis. And for trusted traders, this will, of course, benefit traders as well with reduced costs, efficiency, and operational optimization. Next slide, please. So as we've seen, the government is considering many simplification improvements to benefit traders with international trade transactions. Therefore, in order to be ready for when the schemes are launched, traders should start to look at their own processes and the importance of best practice for customs compliance within their business. To benefit from the Trusted Trader scheme, traders will need to demonstrate a high level of customs compliance with their business. You need to maintain good and accurate records, be able to demonstrate that the goods have exported where VAT 0 rated invoices are raised, and then hold the relevant documents on file. Traders need to hold official evidence and commercial evidence of that international journey that all show that the goods have gone overseas. And these records need to be held for 6 years to comply with the HMRC's VAT requirements. You need to have defined and written customs processes and procedures in place. Demonstrate how you maintain your records, but also how you classify your products, how you determine the origin, and how do you arrive at the value of the goods, which valuation method has been used. And again, these three are the key things for calculating duties and creating those customs declarations correctly when we're at the import customs declaration stage. Having an internal compliance program in place as well, it will help you to put those processes and procedures in place and to maintain your level of compliance through continuous improvement. Carry out your own internal audits and train members of the trade and finance teams to do so. This helps self-check the quality of the data being recorded, the record-keeping processes, and highlights quickly any issues or shortfalls, such as non-conformances where remedial actions can be applied. Apply business standards such as ISO and AEO. Having your systems and standards audited by an external body gives extra credence to your internal processes and procedures and demonstrates an extra level of compliance as well. Have clearly written contracts between the buyer and the seller. As well as this, clearly define Incoterms as well and ensure an appropriate term is used for the collection or delivery, whichever method you prefer to use with your customers and your suppliers, as well as the mode of transport being used, so they all account for the correct Incoterm. And this all goes a long way to help traders demonstrate good knowledge of international trade practice and an understanding of the importance of compliance, which will put businesses in good stead for applying for the Trusted Trader scheme once it has been launched. I'll hand back to Will for the next poll, please.
Thank you, Suzanne. As mentioned, we are on to another poll, and I believe we're going to be on to the Q&A in general as well. But here, just following on from Suzanne's point, we are asking, should there be different trusted trader tiers based on AEO status, existing customs authorizations, or your compliance record? The options there saying that there should be different tiers or that people should benefit equally. An option there to say the benchmark is AEO and should stay so, or there should be, or there's a require more information to be able to answer this poll. But as noted, we are very much into the questions now. So I'm going to start with a question from Paul for Suzanne, which I think quite neatly sums up the situation for a lot of exporters. And we're getting a few questions similar to this. So Paul asks, what do we need to take into account as an SME where export accounts for approximately 35% of our turnover, but expert paperwork for all shipments are handled by the freight provider?
Yes, so as a trader, even if you are a small business, the liability to produce the export declaration lies with the trader. So although your freight provider is handling the export paperwork for you, the onus does come back to the business itself. The trader is the owner of the data that's provided to the customs agent. So this could be where the freight forwarder that you initially work with is then assisting the trader to complete an export declaration, maybe with another customs agent. What I would say is that you need to ensure that as a business you are compliant. Make sure that the export clearance instructions are passed over to the freight forwarder and the customs agent, and that you have a direct representative authorization in place, with the agent that's going to be completing the export declaration on your behalf, so that they can follow your instructions and you've given them the permission to use your authorizations, and then you know that that information is going to be done correctly. Obtain a copy of the official export evidence for your records and check the accuracy of the data. So again, traders often think that because the freight forwarder is doing it, it's their responsibility. That responsibility does lie with the trader. So making sure that you do get that copy back, check the content, and then make sure that you hold all the other evidences on file. So the export declaration is an official export evidence, but you also need the commercial and transport evidence. So for example, a copy of the invoice or a CMR note or a bill of lading. And if you can, obtain a CMR note that's been signed by the overseas customer as proof of delivery. Again, that shows that international journey from door to door, and that's a good transport evidence to hold on file. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Hopefully some useful info for exporters on the line there. Just going to close the response to that poll. Again, unsurprisingly, it's early stages, so only 28% of you saying you need more information, and that's completely understandable. Keep your eyes peeled for further webinars from us, by the way, because we will be trying to educate the trader community about all of these new things. But 40% of you want some flexibility. You think there should be different tiers. 14% say people should benefit equally, and then 17% saying AEO is the benchmark. Suzanne, I'll start with you and then pass to Kevin on this, but is that about what you'd expect? Businesses tend to want flexibility, don't they?
Yes, they do, and flexibility is a good thing, because if you think of the different types of businesses, the sizes of business, and one size doesn't fit all. So whilst AEO does have that very high standard in place, we see that quite a lot of smaller companies don't go for it due to the level of requirements that are within it. So if those companies can benefit from some kind of scheme that's in place where they are being compliant, where they are maintaining good records, but they understand that if they go a little bit further beyond, if they could do that, say up to the AO standard, then that's going to offer them some kind of benefits. So yes, it's good to see that we've got 40% of people on the call today thinking that there should be different tiers.
And Kevin, anything to add to there?
No, I think Suzanne's covered it very well. And again, thank you everybody for completing the poll. I think these are really important to get your feedback, and it is fascinating feedback. And certainly at the Institute, we're keen that compliant traders, legitimate traders, who maintaining all the points, the compliant points that Suzanne went through, do receive benefit. And we wouldn't also underestimate the importance of customs authorizations as well. We've talked previously in previous webinars around the importance, where applicable, of using authorizations such as inward processing, customs warehousing, and so on. So it's really for businesses to reflect. But we've always said you can gain trade advantage by looking at trade fulfillment and trade compliance. Trade compliance is not just about being compliant, it can also gain competitive advantage. So trade compliance becomes trade facilitation.
Thanks, Kevin. And I should make the point that we will be sharing the YouTube channel link afterwards for all the introductory webinars we've done, kind of outlining some of these processes and benefits. But if you're a member of the Institute, you've also got access to the lunchtime learning webinars, which deep dive into some of these processes specifically. So lots of great information there for both the wider community, but also for our members. And we'll share links afterwards. We've got on the next slide, we've got about 10 or so minutes for questions, and then we've got a few more slides to finish up on, and in those slides we'll be talking about what happens next and how the Institute can support. So do stay on for that. But we're going to do a few questions now, and actually the first one is from Rebecca, and it really picks up on the compliance point which both of you were just making. So Rebecca says, could you say a bit more about why businesses need to be trade compliant, and can you give some examples of what I need to do? Suzanne, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so HMRC set out a number of requirements that traders need to meet to be compliant in order that duty and taxes are correctly calculated. The HMRC expect products to be classified correctly, And we've got the UK integrated tariff, which is a great tool for traders to use. You can go on there, you can search products, you can search the code if you know the first, say, this first 6 digits of the code, and you get some really useful information on there. It explains, you know, anything to do with the duty, customs duty, excise duty, taxes. It also gives you information about imports and exports, so you can type in the country that you're trading with, and it gives you a bit more background information. Also, whether we've got trade deals with those countries, which then really helps you if you're going to be exporting to those countries. You need to know if your customer's going to be able to benefit from use of preference throughout that trade deal. So again, it's a great tool for traders to use. We've also got the rules of origin that need to be followed. So again, within the trade deals, the rules of origin, specific rules of origin for commodities will be outlined. And we also have to look at the valuation method as well. So all these tools are outlined under WTO, so that they do give traders a fair advantage when they are trading internationally. When traders are given an IOE number by HMRC, they're able to trade internationally, and this is an authorization that's given by HMRC under certain expectations that need to be fulfilled as well. So as an exporter, when you raise 0 rated VAT invoices, HMRC expect you to have that evidence on file as to why you have done that. They give you 12 weeks to obtain that information. So again, there's a facilitation there. But wherever you're getting these authorizations, there is an expectation that you're going to meet those requirements that HMRC have allowed you to have by having that authorization. HMRC also allows traders to operate autonomously under those authorizations. But as I say, they do expect traders to meet their trade compliance requirements. Holding the correct documents on file, as I said before, make sure you get that evidence of export, you know, the C88 or the SAD document, the S8, the export movement departure notice, and the commercial evidence as well, as we said, the invoices, evidence of overseas payments, the transport evidence as well. So all these things that evidence that international journey, hold them on file, and then should you be audited by HMRC, then you should have a compliant record for them to come and audit.
Terrific. And we did a webinar together, Suzanne, I think in April about
Yes.
auditing and compliance. So again, that's one you can
That's
keep your eyes peeled on. And I think we're together again in a webinar in early October about rebooting exports to the EU. So we'll be talking about some of these considerations then as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. We're getting loads of fantastic questions coming through. So thank you, everyone. Just a quick reminder that we're not going to do any questions which are, you know, getting to the politics or the exact timelines of this model. As Kevin has alluded to earlier, it's very much evolving. It's not been published yet, the target operating model, but we can just answer according to what we know and can share at this time. But we had a really good question from Terry. It's one I often ask, and you referred to it in your presentation, the ecosystem of trust. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this means? What is an ecosystem of trust?
Yeah, thanks, Warren, and thank you for the question. I've actually got it on a slide in a couple of minutes, but no, let's address the question, because it's at our MemberCon this year we held in Birmingham. We went through it, but it's important, I think, for the whole industry to hear. So in the UK, it's referred to as ecosystem of trust. In other countries, it's possibly referred to as the likes of digital trade corridors. But it's ultimately, it's there to take information in the supply chain at the earliest source in the supply chain. So whether that's information from, let's say, the grower, whether that's information from a logistics service provider, information from the overseas government. It's really to try and clear the import and de-risk at the earliest possible side in the supply chain. So if I use one example, there was a couple of examples the Institute involved in. One is what we call our African Trade Corridor, and another is movements of EU to GB, using, for example, frozen fish as the example. But so the idea is to try and get supply chain information as early as possible. And that is also to try and prove provenance. Provenance is really, really important for different HMG agencies. If we consider it in the UK context, the likes of Border Force, the likes of HMRC, the likes of DEFRA, Food Standards Agency, and so on. And then also not just to get the information into a distributed ledger technology, some people may refer it to blockchain, but it has to be interoperable, so it has to talk with other systems. And there are a number of platforms out there with very reliable businesses and organizations behind them. It's also to demonstrate traceability in the goods movement. So some of us may refer to it as track and trace, but it goes on there. So by creating a digital seal or geo-tracking, you can actually track any interference in the trade journey. So that also becomes important. But it also, coming back to Trusted Trader, it's not just providing advanced information, it's as much information as possible. Ingredients, what are the ingredients, for example, provided? A good goods description, so not just a commodity code, but an effective and clear goods description as well. The true origin of the goods is absolutely key. If any government agency anywhere in the world to de-risk must have good information at source and reliable. I could talk for days on this, but I'll probably try to summarize it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. It sounds as though it's really bringing together quite a lot of technologies and different solicitations to kind of enable just a better environment for trade. So it sounds very exciting, and yeah, as noted, we'll be, I'm sure, doing more webinars on it in the coming months as more details come to fruition. But I wanted to ask a more practical question. It comes from Vivek. His company receives regular shipments from Germany from the same supplier, and he's asking, how could his company benefit from the facilitations mentioned in this webinar? Suzanne, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so repeat business is the best business to have. I think Kevin actually mentioned that earlier on in the webinar. It demonstrates the regularity to customs, shows you that you are that regular trader. And if at the outset of the relationship, when you start talking to your customers and your suppliers, you can speak to customs, you can make sure that you've looked at your import, your export procedures, work with the customer in Germany or the supplier in Germany, work with any intermediaries that you're going to be having in between you two to get things through the border, and speak to customers as well. Certainly one thing that I did in one of my previous roles was to talk to customs so that they were aware of what was coming over. We had quite a lot of unusual products and many tariff codes, which is something that does get stopped and checked. So if you're able to actually facilitate customs and get them to have a check over that they're happy with it, you can get that little tick that yes, we know that that trader is good. So that regular business, when they then see that repeat business coming in, it all works for traders, and it helps you to have much smoother import transactions as well. I think the key points as well here are demonstrating the compliance. So again, making sure that you are classifying the goods correctly and following the rules of origin. If you're going to be using preference at import, make sure that you're able to demonstrate that. And if you have any authorizations that are required at import, evidence these, that you're going to put you in a good position so that they can start to consider you to be operating as a trusted trader once the schemes have been launched. So yes, you should absolutely be able to benefit if you've got that good repeatable business. Thank you.
Fantastic, and yeah, it really does go to the point Kevin said earlier. Repeatable business seems to be the main thing to aspire to. Obviously, not always possible, but I'm sure these facilitations will help that in particular. We've had a really good question from Adrian, which sort of gets to the heart of the matter. Adrian says, why do we still have import and export clearances when it is all the same information? And he raises the single administrative document, and a few people have been mentioning this as an example. I assume although the information is all put in one place. So Suzanne, do you want to start on that? Why is there different clearances in place?
And this is the whole point of the single trade window. We have lots of different systems. So just in the UK, we have separate systems for different types of declarations that are needed to get things through the border. You know, we've got Chief, we're going to be moving on to CDS. We see also on the transit side, people are using NCTS or GVMS. So lots of different systems are in place. And then when you get to the other side, on the other side, those countries are also using their own systems. And if you're moving products that do require licenses and special authorizations, then you introduce even more systems. So the single trade window is going to be really beneficial. It's going to prevent that duplication of data entry. And, you know, international trade is actually quite behind the curve on technology. So it really is something that's going to help customers and traders and countries as well to actually be able to improve the international trade that they're going to have. So when we have that international single trade window in place, hopefully maybe in the distant future, it should help to translate the information between the different governments, the different government departments. So right at the output from an export, which is the beginning of that international trade, you're going to see the secure data transfer of the information that's entered by the exporter, and hopefully it should be able to transfer through to the importing country and populate their required systems as well. Then it should prevent all the different intermediaries and traders having to re-enter that data over and over again. So at the moment, we do have the risk as well that things are going to be inaccurate, because you are asking, you know, a number of parties to enter that data. So that single trade window as well, with that one point of entry, should hopefully give much more accurate data. So yes, absolutely something that should be at the forefront of the government's agenda, is to design that single trade window to really help traders.
It seems a really exciting time in it to some extent if international trade is catching up with the curve, as you say, Suzanne. I mean, we've had a load of webinars recently about digitalisation, single trade window, and how traders can prepare for it. And it really does seem as though something's coming to a head here. So do keep an eye out for future webinars on digitalisation. Because it is becoming very much the thing, and Kevin, I'm sure will agree that the Institute is very much at the forefront of leading that push within government and as a stakeholder. So yeah, absolutely. Just a couple quick fire questions. I think I know what the answer is going to be to these, because the target operating model isn't actually published yet. So a lot of the details are going to come out when it's published, but a lot of people have been asking about details about how to apply for the trusted trader scheme, when it's going to be launched, etc., and so on. A lot of people asking about the categories of low risk, high risk, or all those kind of categories you mentioned earlier. Kevin, am I right in saying that we'll find out more when it's published, and the Institute will try to pass on information as and when it becomes available?
Yes, we will, and I think we're obviously keen, as soon as it comes available, we'll let everyone know. I think equally, we're also here to hear from you, and obviously there's a survey afterwards. And any ideas and thoughts you've got are very much welcome. We're still in listening mode at the moment. We have, you know, great members, great alumni who have completed our qualifications, and, you know, great people in the industry. So we're very much also in listening mode, and welcome to hear from you as well. So please don't hesitate to do that. Because, you know, some of the great ideas, I think, have very much come from our interaction with yourselves. So, but as soon as we hear more, we'll let you know. But we still have an opportunity to influence future direction.
Thanks, Kevin. And for people asking when we anticipate the publication of the model, the government has said it's in the autumn, and I think we can't say anything more than that. So yeah, it'll be the next few months, I'm sure. But the next slide, as we start to wrap up, I'm just going to do one last poll and one last question for Kevin. So the poll is asking, based on the content in today's webinar, which of the following represents your position? So it's, I'm in a good position to achieve the facilitations. You can meet the compliance requirements, but you need to learn more. Need support to meet the compliance requirements, or benefits are harder to achieve for my business due to the goods that you trade. And Kevin, just while people are answering that poll, I guess the question I want to ask you is, what is the main takeaway that businesses on the line today can take away from this webinar? What do businesses really need to prioritize over the next coming months?
Yeah, so I guess one of the main messages is trade is changing, both exports, both imports. The export side, we've not discussed free trade agreements, for example, too much, but trade is changing, and there is an opportunity here for businesses to benefit from the way trade is changing. We've talked around, obviously, some of the aspects today. So look at the nature of your business. What does your business do, and what is your role in the whole supply chain? It's not just, as I've said, for importers and exporters. Where are you in that supply chain? So reflect on today, and we would say start to prepare for the potential future direction of travel. And clearly, we will be providing you with information on how you can benefit from that.
Thank you, Kevin. It seems a really good call to arms there. The importance of preparing for this, even though the details are still to come in some cases, there's still preparation you can do on the compliance piece, which both of you have mentioned today so eloquently. I'm just going to share the results of that poll. And interestingly, 49% of you answered the most there, can meet compliance requirements, but need to learn more. But 20% of you, a fifth of you, are in a good position to achieve them already. So that's encouraging, I'd say. Another fifth of you need support to meet these requirements, and then a tenth of you think the benefits will be harder for you to achieve due to the goods that you trade. Kevin, though, I mean, it's over 60% of people are, you know, they're not in a bad place. That seems quite an encouraging poll.
No, it is really encouraging, and it's really good. And as you say, we very much want to work together with you to get these key messages across, because you know, we should never underestimate the great quality of people that we have working in this industry.
Absolutely, would 100% echo that. But I'm going to hide the poll, and then we've got a few more slides just on what happens now. Kevin, over to you in the next slide.
Thank you. So in terms of how are the Institute of Export and International Trade supporting? So we've always been very focused on professionalising the industry. So we want compliant businesses to benefit. We have authorised economic operator consultancy support services across a range. We provide gap analysis in terms of what you need to achieve AEO status. Clearly, we have dramatic and big changes coming on CDS, which impacts the whole industry and traders as well, because ultimately traders are responsible, businesses are responsible for the information that goes forward. We provide qualifications, and we're doing that in a UK sense, but we're also doing that globally as well. So we have a partnership with United Nations agencies, and in particular the International Trade Centre's SME Trade Academy, to deliver global qualifications around the world. Because as I said, these initiatives are global initiatives. We think what's happening globally with the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Area, these are dramatic changes that are taking place. The ASEAN Southeast Asia single window. So these are all dramatic changes. And it's not just about delivering these in other countries, these benefit UK businesses as well. Next slide, please. So we've talked around ecosystem of trust. I probably don't need to say too much more about that, but say very happy to provide further input, but also development of trade corridors. So yes, Africa, yes, the EU, but there's other regions and countries of the world. We're involved in the new electronic trade documents bill, which will be going before Parliament in September, creating this concept of e-documentation, e-bills of lading, e-certificates of origin. Also, legal entity identifiers will become key around this whole element of being a legitimate trader anywhere in the world by gaining a legal entity identifier, which is being driven by the G20 countries. We're obviously keen to respond in full to HMG consultations, and also just a quick call here around SPS. Is that we know SPS can be more complex, and it's not just SPS. We've held webinars on export controls, dual use goods, which are also very important. CITES, there's so many examples. Is that we've established an SPS Centre of Excellence, which we're very, very keen to hear your feedback. I was on a call with DEFRA recently, and I was looking at so many of the names on that call that are our alumni, and there's some great people in this industry. So please contact us if you want to work with us as part of this SPS Centre of Excellence. So back to you, Will. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And on the last slide, it lands on me to give this slide, and to also first of all say thank you, Kevin, and also Suzanne, for today's presentations and for giving us that sort of early view, as it were, of the government's target operating model and what it might look like when it's announced in the autumn. So thank you so much. And as you can see here, the Institute is here to help traders and to be your voice into government. Members of the Institute drive our policies and the feedback we give to government. So if you're not already a member and want to be heard, please do go onto the site export.org.uk to find out details about how you can join. There you will see all the different ways we can help you to adjust to changes in the international trade landscape and how we can support you to grow in overseas markets, whether that's through advice on our technical helpline, discounts on our training or consultancy services, or by attending webinars just like this one. Indeed, we are running a series of lunchtime learning webinars for members in the autumn, which will dive a little deeper into the UK's border plans, particularly the 2025 border strategy and the target operating model. So please do sign up to those webinars. But as well as our members, we do represent the wider trader community as well. So please do take the survey we mentioned earlier that you will be receiving a link to by email this afternoon. In this email, you will also receive a recording from today's webinar and a copy of the slides. Please do feel free to get in touch if for any reason you don't see this email. For now though, just a big thank you for joining today's webinar. We hope you found it useful and do keep your eyes peeled for future webinars as more details about the future of UK trade comes through. But that's it, bye everyone and see you on the next one. Thank you.